Welcome into This is MLS. I'm your host, Kaylin Kyle. Let's bring in the guys, Caitlin Carr, Dax McCarty joining me today. And there is some breaking news. A man on this episode turned 25 years young. Happy birthday, Dax.
Oh, thank you, Kaylin. And I'm shocked you got my age right, too.
Some people... you did send me like 5 texts with it. So I'm just pretty sure I got it right?
Let me just say, by the way, had a great morning, started off bright and early, playing some pickleball with a couple other, Atlanta United legends, Mark Bloom, Mikey Ambrose, great dudes. And then you know what? My wife had a really nice spa day planned for us. And I said, no. This week I'm on This is MLS with the 2 Kaylins, and there's no way I want to go get a massage, spend the day at the spa. I want to be here with my 2 favorite people.
No pro days, Dax. No pro days for you yet.
No days off.
Caitlin, you know why Dax has said this? Because him and Kevin Egan this weekend got couples facials before heading into Monday Night Soccer. So I'm going to throw that out there.
That is very cute.
I also need to mention there is a certain Arsenal fan that works in our orbit that maybe took some liberties in the day off for his birthday for This is MLS. And I'm not naming names, but I just wanted to say I want to be here with you guys.
Bradley Wright Phillips did not. Let's get straight into it because we're 10 match days in to the 2025 season. So, Caitlin, let's start with you. What's your biggest headline heading into this upcoming weekend?
Well, I think just when I zoom out and look at these first 10 matches, the biggest shift for me is this new rule, the cash player trade rule, where you can move interleague without general allocation money, targeted allocation money, just straight cash and straight for the player. And that's been a big shift where you see a player like Evander who was unhappy in Portland and then suddenly shifts immediately to Cincinnati, or Lucho Acosta who leaves Cincinnati and goes to Dallas. Dejan Joveljic goes to Sporting Kansas City, and the latest Gazdag going to Columbus. And what I love most about it is it helps teams recover quickly. So in the past, you'd see maybe a star player leave. They'd have to be sold out of MLS. Now they stay. We keep that quality, and you have the known quality coming from team to team. I think from a fan's perspective, it's more interesting. Maybe the player you hated last season might be on your team the next. And frankly, it's the big players. It's players that have been in the race for golden boots, for MVPs. We've seen this in other leagues. We've seen this in other sports. But now that extra dynamic, I think, already has made MLS even more interesting through these first 10 matches.
Kaylin, you led me directly into my argument and the biggest headline going into week 11 of the MLS season. And you mentioned it. It's these great attacking players who we would not see in MLS if it wasn't for this new rule. But it's also made this MLS Golden Boot race, I think, one of the best in MLS history through 11 weeks. You have 18 players who have scored 5 or more goals. And the top of the leaderboard is Ty Baribo and Hugo Kuipers on 7 goals apiece. It's been enthralling stuff from the attacking players who you want to see. This coming from a defensive midfielder who appreciates the defensive nuances of the game. I can also recognize that people pay their hard-earned money to go and see the elite attacking players in this league. They get people out of their seats, and they have not disappointed. And I don't just want to single out the strikers who have been excellent. It's also the attacking midfielders. One of them you mentioned in Evander, who I don't even think has hit his top form yet. He already has 6 goals on the season. You have a Georgi Mihailovic in Colorado who's carrying the team, and a Diego Luna, 2 number 10s who are both Americans, who are both on squads who I think will be challenging for playoff spots, who are carrying their teams right now. It's a really fascinating Golden Boot race. I expect it to go down to the last week of the season. You can't pick a favorite right now because there are so many great players banging in the goals. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting Golden Boot races we see in MLS history.
Let's stick with the big players, the big money signings, because this past weekend, Charlotte welcomed the New England Revolution. For Charlotte, they remained perfect at the bank. Then the Revs come into the home soil. They get the 1-0 win. It was a brilliant, brilliant game. Wilfried Zaha, though, took to social media post and said, typical. We lost the game, and somehow it's Zaha's fault. I dribble, I'm selfish. I shoot, I should have passed. I pass, I should have finished my chances. I usually wouldn't reply to stupid beep, but I'm not a scapegoat for people to waffle about in clubs anymore. Zaha, this Zaha, that, but we had the best start ever and I've been first in the league, so please stop chapping, especially my name. This is really interesting because we all know Dean Smith is a very old school manager. We saw it in Europe. Now we're seeing it here in Major League Soccer. So Dax, I want to go to you guys. Both of you guys have played in the league. You played at the highest level. When you do have a player like this, that's kind of clapping back at the media, clapping back at the fans, saying, stop blaming me, stop putting this pressure on me. You were brought in to be that big money signing. So there is expectation. Does this ruin inside the locker room as maybe other players are inside there?
I don't think it ruins anything inside the locker room, Kaylin, but I do think that it's unnecessary. Wilfried Zaha spoke in his introductory press conference about his reasons for going over to Turkey, his reasons for coming to MLS. And he specifically said, I do not care what anyone thinks about me and my decisions. I'm going to do what makes me happy. And I loved hearing that. It's just this Snapchat and this response to a little bit of, let's call it, supporter frustration with how he has played so far. It just screams insecurity to me. And it screams insecurity from a player who has shown a little bit of this type of petulance in his past. And now he's a mercurial player. He has more talent in his right pinky toe than myself or most players in MLS ever have. But that still doesn't mean that he needs to go and show his frustration publicly. It's fine to be frustrated. He's had a very stop-start, choppy start to the season. I don't think he's even been close to his best, but he said it in his Snapchat. They're first in the East. They've had a great start to the season, even with him not playing his best. And so he comes over here, and this is just me speculating, but I think it's possible that he thought MLS would be easier than it is, and he has been frustrated. He's the most fouled player in Premier League history. So yes, he has been fouled. He's been kicked. Ashley Westwood has talked about it. But you would think at his age now and maybe the maturity level we expect him to have that he would just let this slide and a little bit of fan stick wouldn't get to him. It's definitely a little bit insecure of him. But I will say, in a locker room with Ashley Westwood and with Tim Ream, I expect them to deal with this quickly and Dean Smith to deal with this and it not to be a big deal. I thought it was Wilfried Zaha's best performance of the season last game. He just needs to focus on playing and just block out all the exterior noise because he can be a real threat for this team once he gets going.
But Dax, we've seen this before with players coming abroad where, maybe they're adjusting to the league and it's the travel is different, the stadiums, the turf. But the media attention, the pressure, I know he was on Countdown. What did you guys say to him?
I don't even think we were that hard on him. It's almost like
not at all.
The media side, we're saying we're not seeing the best of him, which is a great problem for Charlotte. Dax, you just touched on it. Charlotte entering into match day 10, we're first in the league. Now they're fourth. They are taking on, though, the Columbus Crew this coming weekend. So it's Charlotte coming off a disappointing loss at the bank against the New England Revolution and a Columbus Crew side under Wilfried Nancy that continue to find and grind out results. How do you guys see this match going?
Well, I do think Zaha is going to be a big part of things going forward. The part that concerned me a little bit, Dax, is less about the media and the Snapchats and all that. It was actually his body language on the pitch a little bit that threw me off and said, okay, well, a bad pass comes this way and he throws his hands up. And you can't really do that if you're coming from the experience that he has playing in these difficult environments. And yes, I actually agree with him as far as, they're a top team still. I expect them to be a top 4 team. And the part of it is just that adjustment, I think, that will help them is Pep Biel. He has the playmaker behind them. He leads MLS in assists. And Pep Biel's a good model as far as, hey, this guy didn't have it as much as we see it this season at his beginning moments in MLS. So take your time, stay patient, stick with the program. Those chances are coming. You'll put them away. And I think Charlotte just have to cut out the noise a little bit and say, hey, take some of your own advice, read your own piece. We're still a top 4 team. Don't worry about the noise and let's refocus.
With all that
sorry, Daxie, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the Columbus-Charlotte matchup really quick. I have to say, I think that this is a very tricky game for Charlotte. I don't think we've seen the best of Columbus. I think when we look back to Columbus's last 2 games, the amount of chances that they've created against Inter Miami and against the San Jose Earthquakes, it could have been much worse. And I think once Columbus finds their shooting boots and once Gazdag gets a little bit more comfortable, whoever they play when they find those shooting boots is going to be in some serious trouble. Charlotte hasn't been great on the road. I see Columbus winning this game and winning it pretty handily.
And Charlotte has their next 3 on the road, and Biel is a little bit of an injury concern, came off in the 60th minute, so you have to monitor that one as well.
Yeah.
Dax, I love the shooting boots because this leads me to my next point, true or false. You look at Cincinnati currently sitting top of the Eastern Conference, and they've done it very sneakily. It's a team that we really haven't talked that much into at the beginning of the year. We're obviously talking about them now. They're currently sitting on 22 points. So true or false, Kevin Denkey and Evander are the league's best 1-2 punch.
I'm going true. And this one, for me, is pretty simple. You have 2 players in Kevin Denkey and Evander that we haven't even seen close to the best of either of them. And they both are on 6 goals each. And Sasha Klesha made a great point on Wrap Up the other day where he said they haven't even really linked up together very well. And these are 2 players who individually are still finding chances. They're still finding goals. Kevin Denkey coming off his best performance of the season where he gets a brace. The second one is the game winner. Nothing, just a full bicycle kick, no problem. And we're still saying we expect more of them. Evander has dealt with a small injury to kind of, break up his time on the field here, and he's already on 6 goals. I expect both of these guys to just continue to get better and better, especially when they get healthy behind them. We haven't seen Wobodo and Buka as much. This is a team when Luca Orejano gets going as well, who has such an embarrassment of riches up top. Once Evander and Denkey get on the same page, I just see them continuing to take off from here. So yes, they're, for me, easily the best 1-2 punch in MLS at the moment.
But 1-2 punch implies a 1-2, right? There's some passing, there's some moving, a connection. I'm pretty sure he just threw a bike off a corner kick, and we see Evander pulling up from deep from set pieces. So, I'm still sticking with the players with the connection, and for me, the obvious one is still Messi and Suárez. The interchanging, the understanding. These 2 players just came together with Denkey and Evander. I agree that they're going to get better as the season progresses, but sometimes I think the obvious answer is the right one. It's still Messi and Suárez.
Well, Kalen, I will say the other Kalen won't be happy with what I'm going to say here.
I'm shaking my head right now, gentlemen.
In order for Messi and Suárez to be a great 1-2 punch,
here we go.
One of them has to be on the end of the other one's passes, okay? And when both of them drop so deep into midfield, then you have guys like Benja Kremoski and Segovia and Allende are the ones that are actually scoring the goals if it's not Messi right now. Hey, Suárez, I think he's a wonderful player. He started the season very well. He's not getting in the box that much.
He doesn't need to when he's making assists to Benjamin Kremoski. You
Are
guys are
forget
crazy.
Ryan Gold?
How is Vancouver Whitecaps not even in your conversation right now? I know, Dax, you're going to throw me under the bus here. I love Vancouver. I grew up with the Vancouver Whitecaps. But the best goal record in Major League Soccer, they've only conceded 7. You have Brian White, and I know it's just in Major League Soccer, but you have him doing it in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. You have him doing it in league play. How is that not the 1-2 punch? I mean, he can have a 1-2 punch with anyone on that team.
Well, Kalen, he has to actually be on the field. And so I think, yes, you are 100% correct that we have to find ways to give a shout out to Vancouver every show because they are so good and so impressive right now. I would actually argue that the 1-2 punch that I've been most impressed with is Brian White. And then I'm going to cheat here and say the entire Vancouver Whitecaps midfield.
I'm saying it's a knockout tax.
Big deal. Okay, we're not going to start Seb Berhalter or Vite against Minnesota United, who I considered one of the better teams in the league defensively. Kubas isn't even available. What do? You sub them in, you bring these guys off the bench, and they just go and win the game for you. So listen, Vancouver, they absolutely deserve their flowers. Once Ryan Gauld gets healthy, it's actually scary to think about this team getting better.
Well, they are going to get better, Daxie, because there's a big game for them coming up against Inter Miami, the second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But before we dive into that, I want to take a look at the conferences right now. Let's jump into the West because it's no surprise right now. Vancouver doing what they do best. Currently 23 points sitting top of the table, followed by Phil Neville's men Portland, Austin, Minnesota, Colorado, Dallas, San Diego, LAFC, and Seattle. At the bottom half of the Western Conference standings, LA Galaxy, still searching for their first win of the season. Kansas City with 2 wins on the season after the firing of their head coach. Jumping over to the Eastern Conference, Cincinnati, top spot, 22 points. Columbus, Philly, Charlotte, rounding out those final playoff positions as the 2 New York teams, the Red Bulls and New York City. And at the bottom half of the table, Montreal still looking for their first win of the season. We thought Toronto had turned a corner, but they are coming off a loss on match day 10. Which leads us into this next discussion, because you have 2 teams without a win. So for the LA Galaxy, though, I think there's a bigger spotlight on it. You're the reigning MLS Cup champs. You still don't have a win on the season. You have players that have come back healthy. Yes, you've been without Ricky Puig, but is Greg Vanney feeling the pressure, Dax?
He should be. If he's not, he should be feeling pressure at this moment in time right now, because I was okay letting the LA Galaxy get a couple of excuses in terms of the offseason that they had and why it took them so long to get healthy. Yes, they dealt with injury issues, no question about it, and they dealt with a turbulent offseason where they lost some significant pieces. I'm not giving them that excuse anymore. It is unacceptable for the LA Galaxy to be 10 games into a season and be winless. And not just winless, but look bereft of ideas. It's been a turbulent start to the season for them on both ends of the field. On the attacking end, they look disjointed. They haven't had their main pieces contribute at near a high enough level. Gabriel Peck, we're talking about a valuation at the end of last year around $20 to $25 million if a team wanted to come and buy him. He hasn't played near well enough this season to help carry this team when Joseph Paintsil was injured. And Christian Ramirez has come in and he's scored a few goals. Marco Reus hasn't been good enough. He's dealt with a couple of injuries, but he was a guy who you expected to really replace what Ricky Puig did. And it's not a like-for-like replacement, but Marco Reus hasn't been good enough. I know he played a little bit better, got on the score sheet against the Portland Timbers, but then you just look top to bottom, and it has to come down to leadership, and it has to come down to Greg Vanney, because Greg Vanney, I consider him one of the better coaches in MLS. He's a multi-time MLS Cup champion. He hasn't pushed the right buttons and made enough changes for this LA Galaxy team to get out of this rut they are in. The pressure is on Greg Vanney and this LA Galaxy team to turn things around, because very shortly it's going to be too little too late.
They are getting close to already being out of playoff contention. It's getting scary, but the part that I keep going back to is, where have I heard this before? Is Greg Vanney feeling the pressure? We've heard this the beginning of last season. We heard it the season before. And what happened? They were able to win MLS Cup, and that was 10 games ago. So in the process, they lost Ricky Puig, their most important player. I think that now you can evaluate a little bit or reevaluate a little bit of Paintsil and Peck and say, well, Puig may be the most important piece to make them even better. But yeah, there's no way they should be down, no wins in 10 matches. That's unacceptable. And I think Vanney has to figure out a little bit of how does he change this game model to be a little bit more pragmatic. But as far as throwing everything out the window at this point, I remember the Galaxy not that long ago where every 2 years they blew it up and started and tried again with a whole new vision. That wasn't pretty. That didn't bring trophies. That didn't bring success. So I'm trusting Vanney still. I still believe that he's going to get this right over time. When he gets his healthy pieces back, it may take most of the season. It may cost them the playoffs. But I'm not throwing it all out the window.
They knew that they were going to be without Ricky Puig, though. They had 3 months to bring in maybe someone. So do you think that they were hoping that Marco Reus would be the answer in the middle of the pitch without the likes of Ricky Puig until midsummer?
I don't think so. I think that sort of verdict was out at the end of last year, but it wasn't just Puig. It was Delgado, who was an important piece of that midfield. It was Joveljic, who was sold due to salary cap issues. That was the striker position that would help them sustain some of these. It was the injuries, the goalkeeping play, individual errors, mistakes. So it was a larger picture, and Vanney's definitely a part of it, but so many things went wrong, and I'm not trying to alleviate pressure. I like that there's pressure, by the way, in MLS 10 games in. That's a sign of progress. But I also think that it's not so simple that it's, we're going to change the manager or, start talking about situations like that when just 10 matches ago, they were lifting MLS Cup.
Let's talk about pressure, though, because over in Atlanta United, Dax, your old club, they've now gone out and spent over $50 million, and they have yet to impress us this season, both in the attack and both defensively. So what can we make of this Atlanta United side? It almost looks like there's a lack of chemistry.
Well, it's clear there's a lack of chemistry. There's no question there's a lack of chemistry. I think you would even get Atlanta United to admit there's a lack of chemistry, which is ridiculous 10 games into the season. Let's start with the front office. Garth Lagerwey goes out and he signs Chris Henderson, a very shrewd move, bringing in one of the best general managers that MLS has seen recently, and a familiarity there. And then what do? They go and sign a proven winner in MLS as your head coach and Ronny Deila to then give him the keys to make sure that this thing is heading in the right direction. And then it's the transfer window. Emmanuel Latte-Lat, Miguel Almiron, both considered massive game changers and massive, massive expenditures to bring in and to make sure that this team gets going forward. And I would argue that both of them have been good, but not great. Emmanuel Latte-Lat has cooled off since a good start to the season, and Miguel Almiron looks unsettled. I want to talk about him positionally a little bit because at Newcastle, he played as a right winger, and that's what Atlanta United brought him in for. I'd argue that Miguel Almiron, when he was at Atlanta United the first time, playing centrally with Josef Martinez, had the best moments, the best 2 years, statistically wise, of his career. Scoring goals, getting assists, gets bought from Newcastle. They play him more as a winger. And in his 5-6 years at Newcastle, you could point to maybe 6 months where he had very, very fruitful season where he was scoring goals and getting assists. And Atlanta United brings him back. I do not think that he is the same player that is going to be able to get you 10 goals and 10 assists out on the right wing. So I think Ronny Deila is using him in an improper way. I think Ronny Deila has plenty of game tape now to see that Miguel Almiron is still a good player, but he needs to move him centrally. Alexei Miranchuk and Miguel Almiron are occupying the same spaces. It's on the head coach to figure out a way to get the best out of your best players. And he has not got the best out of Miguel Almiron or Alexei Miranchuk yet. The only time that they looked like they were going to be at their best was when he made a change against NYCFC when they were down 3-1 and it was out of desperation. So this is on Ronny Deila to get right, to make sure he changes and tweaks some things, even if he doesn't want to. This is a coach being stubborn and trying to stick to his principles and what he sees. But you have to change something if you're Atlanta United because it's not working in the attack and it's also not working along the back line. I'd argue that you have bigger issues along the back line. But if you're going to choose to get something right, shore up your back line first. Change something tactically so that you are staying compact and at least not conceding 3 goals every game. Then let your attacking players go and try to find their form and win the game from you. But you need to get Miguel Almiron centrally. Even if it pisses some players off, you need to light a fire under this team right now.
Speaking of pissed off, Dax, you good over there? You're getting a little bit red. Calm down. You've retired from Atlanta United. No, I love the passion, though. Kaylin, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. But I think the tricky part is then what do you do with Miranchuk? Because for me, he has not proven that he is a 10 attacking midfielder that can contribute with goals and assists. I don't think that's his personality. I like him a little bit deeper, as Dax mentioned, and as that adjustment they made. But then the question is, he's not really a defender. He can't cover ground. So then who do you place next to him? Bartosz Szlich has struggled for me this season defensively as well as playing out. So it's a little bit of a tricky one where you're saying, okay, well, if we drop him back a line, then defensively, we're already conceding 3 goals a match. We can't put him back and then have to suffer with even less defensive posture. So I always like the idea of a 3-4-2-1 with the 2 10s just underneath Latte-Lat. And you get Almiron on the ball, you get Miranchuk with a little bit more flexibility to kind of drift and find pockets of space. And I also think the wingbacks would do well with Amador and Brooks to be able to push forward and use that width through them as opposed to Almiron having to come out to that side. But I agree with Almiron getting centrally because sometimes even if you do really well as a winger in the Premier League, well, you want your best players getting the most touches in the crucial part of the pitch. So I agree that this is on Deila to figure out. But I think the tricky piece is if you bring Almiron in, what do you do with Miranchuk?
One point of contention, Kay, really quickly, I'll just piggyback off Kaylin's point because I think it's a good one. You can switch up your formation for sure, right? But if you're Ronny Deila, Do you want to completely switch up your formation and go away from everything that you believe in? I would argue that tactically, to protect Moranchuk a little bit deeper, you just have to rein in your fullbacks a little bit. Pedro Amador and Brooks Lennon have both shown that they're good going forward. But to me, you need to hold them back a little bit deeper, make sure that you're protecting Moranchuk, and play with natural wingers. Sava Lobjanidze as a wide winger on the right, an Edwin Mosquera, or even a young player like a Luke Brennan on the left. Let them go and run at opposing fullbacks 1v1. Get Almiron, Moranchuk, and Latte Lot in the box, around the box to finish off plays with an Ajani Fortune or a Tristan Mayumba as that more deep-lying midfielder, and I think that will solve some of your defensive issues. But I absolutely agree with Kaylin that you need to have balance.
Well, speaking of balance, let's bring some positivity back into the chat, because there was some big news on the weekend. We had Taylor Twellman on MLS Countdown, and he was on the call for the LAFC match. He had said to us on air that Antoine Griezmann hasn't officially, as of yet, signed his contract through Atletico Madrid. The last of the news that we had heard that he was going to sign until the 2026 after the Men's World Cup here right in our own backyard in North America. Then there was also Paul Pogba, the potential transfer news of him going to DC United. And obviously Kevin De Bruyne, that was announced a couple months ago that he would be officially leaving Manchester City after the 2025 season. So let's start with Paul Pogba. Dax, do you think it's a mistake if he comes to Major League Soccer, or do you think it's a mistake if he goes to DC United?
Depends on the contract, Kaylin. So I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer because there's nuance to this.
Okay,
Paul Pogba has not played a professional soccer game since September of 2023. And I'll take it even further. He's only played in 12 games since the start of the 2022 season. He played in 12 games with Juventus. So we're talking about a player who's 32 years old, coming off of no regular soccer for upwards of 3 years, and a player who was already dealing with small injury issues at the end of his time at Manchester United. So I would urge any team trying to sign a Paul Pogba that, yes, if you can get him on the right contract, and what is the right contract? Certainly not a designated player contract. If it's a designated player contract, I would say that would be an unmitigated disaster. If you want to spend some TAM to get him in the building and hope that he can give you 18 months of what we know Paul Pogba is at his best, which is a creative force in the midfield. Someone who can dominate both on the ball with his range of passing and also with his skill on the ball, a late arriver in the box. Someone in MLS who, if he stayed fit, would easily be able to get you 8 goals, 8 to 10 assists if he was fit and healthy. It has to make sense, and it has to be the right team. I'd argue DC United, is it the right fit for a Paul Pogba? I think DC United has 10 other needs that they need to shore up before signing a Paul Pogba. If you were going to tell me that Paul Pogba was going to sign a TAM contract or even a less than TAM contract at a team that's already contending, then I would say absolutely go for it. You need, I think, a good established locker room and culture at a team to bring in Paul Pogba at this point in his career. I don't see it working out at DC United.
Yeah, that's the biggest piece for me for DC is the culture. It's not there, right? I was just on their match last week and they lost 3-0 to Philadelphia, and sure, they need help in the midfield, no doubt about it, but they need a ball winner. They need somebody that can help them defend, and Paul Pogba is not going to be that at this point. Even any point of his career, he's not going to do that dirty work and set the culture of the team and drive them forward. Even the way I saw Wayne Rooney come in and do that in the past, remember that tackle that he came back and, everything, that spirit. And you don't really know what you're going to get from that. And that's the last thing that I think DC United need. And overall, this type of signing is for a club that I think is one piece away from winning a championship. And I feel that way more and more when I see Marco Reus, when I see Olivier Giroud, when I see Gareth Bale. That's the best example where maybe it didn't work out, but you have the locker room set and maybe you get a special moment. But DC United is so far away from that.
Antoine Griezmann, this one got me excited because I was very excited when he was first linked to LAFC, and then he broke my heart when the news had said that he went and signed with Atletico Madrid until 2026, and Taylor Twellman lifted my spirits of potential move to LAFC. What would you make of his presence if he did come to Major League Soccer at this time?
I think Antoine Griezmann would. Yeah, I think he'd be a great signing. I was going to let Kaylin go first, but I just have to admit that I'm a massive
Dax is on one today, Kaylin. Just sit back. It's his birthday.
Hey, it's his B-Day. Let's go.
Hey, I'm a massive Antoine Griezmann fan, and this is apples and oranges to a Paul Pogba because Griezmann is older, but Griezmann has also been playing regularly for Atletico Madrid for the last 8 or 9 years. He's one of their greatest ever players, still playing regularly in the Champions League and in La Liga. And he's a player who has tactical flexibility. I think that's the biggest thing with an Antoine Griezmann. You can play him in a number of different roles, and you know you're going to get quality. And Antoine Griezmann strikes me as almost a quiet leader, a guy who you can look to in the locker room and say, no matter what is happening on the field or off the field, he's going to be a steadying presence. That's the one thing that with Paul Pogba, Paul Pogba, I think he's a very mercurial guy. I think he's a jovial guy. He's always in a good mood. He's always smiling, but I don't think he's ever really been looked at as a natural leader in a locker room. I think Antoine Griezmann can be that piece for any team who's looking to sign him. I think he raises the floor and the ceiling of any team that would go and get him. And of course, the glitz and glamour of LA. Who can say no to that?
Kalen, man of very little words right now. Did he check everything?
Dax said
He
it
can't
all
disagree with
perfectly.
me.
I've been waiting for Griezmann for like 3 years at this point. This guy said he was going to be here, and I'm still waiting.
All right, just very quickly, Dax, a one-word answer. Nothing more, or I'm logging you off. This is MLS. Best landing spot for Kevin De Bruyne.
Chicago Fire. That was
Kalen
2 words.
Fire?
Apologies.
No,
That's
I
fine.
need to push.
That's fine. I'll let it slide.
Well, I've heard this one before. I want to push back on it, and it just comes down to the fact of where Chicago is at and what I see their talent already is there. And they have those wingers, Zikernagel and Bamba. They have the striker in Kuipers, but I like to see Gutierrez in the way that they're building this team with young players. Orahel has been really good. They brought in the 17-year-old Cup as a center back, and I just think back to the time of Dax's period. We both played at the Fire, but I remember when you had Bastian Schweinsteiger, and he was there for 3 seasons. I think he brought the club back up, but didn't bring a trophy. Brought them to the playoffs once, and then I think of maybe some of the pieces that were lost in the mix during that time. Georgi Mihailovic was sent to Montreal. We see now what he's become as a player, but he's a Chicago player. So I still maybe am scarred a little bit from that time. I know it's not a like for like with Basti coming into the team, and it's a different organization, different leadership group, but I'm more committed to seeing the long-term vision of what Chicago's building right now. And it feels a little bit more short-term for me as far as bringing in Kevin De Bruyne. But if it came, I don't think I could complain too much about it.
You know what wasn't short? Your answer. I said one-word answer, guys. All right.
Hey, I was saving it.
Yeah, big potential stars heading to Major League Soccer potentially this summer transfer window. And before the 2026 Men's World Cup, it's the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. And if you want to see more superstars in the U.S. this summer, there's no better place. The Club World Cup, you can watch Miami, Seattle battle it out against the likes of Real Madrid, PSG, Manchester City, and you can scan the QR code on the screen to get your tickets now. Let's take a look at match day 11 because there is some mouth-watering fixtures. I mean, the first game kicking off, Atlanta United welcoming Nashville. Nashville coming off a 7-2 win, but they will travel to the Bends against a struggling Atlanta United side. Chicago welcoming Orlando City. Austin welcoming Minnesota United. And then on the tail end of the games, Vancouver Whitecaps continue to roll and they welcome RSL. And Sunday Night Soccer brings us out to Kansas as Sporting Kansas City welcome LA Galaxy. For the LA Galaxy, still searching for their first win of the season. And for Sporting Kansas City, it looks like they've kind of taken a turn since the firing of head coach Peter Vermes. So heading into this game, Kalen, because it is very interesting, 2 teams struggling as of late, and not as of late, as of the 2025 season. Who's the favorite in this matchup?
It's a good question. Both teams are, I'd say, desperate at this point, but that's what makes this matchup intriguing for me. And I know the results haven't completely been there for Sporting Kansas City, but at home and with what I'm seeing them do on the pitch, I would give them the edge. I think that's the way it's gone for them. And, Kerry Zavagnin, an experienced assistant manager, has stepped into the spot and I think done a really good job. And, even in their last match against Cincinnati, they played really well. They played some good soccer and just, were beat by a bicycle kick from Kevin Denkey. And sometimes that's the way the margins go for them. But I think also a motivated Joveljic, who was moved from LA Galaxy to Sporting Kansas City during the offseason, and that cash transfer rule that I've been singing the praises of for Major League Soccer changing for $4 million. It's a known striker. And I don't care what you tell me, Dax, you know it as well as anybody. When you play against your former side, there's something extra. And this dude only cares about goals. He's going to be extra motivated to show the Galaxy. Yes, he had a great time, lifted the trophy, of course, was a massive piece of that puzzle, especially in the playoffs. But I think it's going to be the Joveljic show, and I'm giving the edge to Sporting Kansas City at home.
Dax, you did say a couple weeks back that we were building a team, and if you were a GM, you were a manager, what striker would you build your team around? And you said Joveljic.
Yeah, I said Joveljic. Can you say revenge game? All right. Listen, I remember after I got traded from the New York Red Bulls to the Chicago Fire, my first game back against the New York Red Bulls. You think I'm hot and bothered now? I chugged about three Red Bulls before that game, and I wanted to do damage. Okay, and I ended up getting a decent assist. Okay, not to toot my own horn, but it is my birthday. We're gonna
roll the video footage in here.
Yeah, we ended up losing the game, but we'll forget about that. I had a nice assist, so it is what it is. But I will say I'm not gonna straddle the fence. I know Kalen wanted to give the slight edge to Sporting Kansas City. I've had the Galaxy as favorites in like the last 3 or 4 weeks and have thought they're going to get off the schneid right now. They're going to win. And every single time they let me down. Since Joseph Paintsil has come back, I've figured that they would get going in the attacking third, and they just haven't yet. I am going Kansas City as the favorites for this one. Kansas City, sneakily enough, they've scored 10 goals in their last 4 games. And now I don't want to mention them defensively because they also ship a ton of goals as well. But I look at that attacking front four of Daniel Shalhoub out wide and Shapi Suleimanov on the other wing with a motivated Joveljic and an informed Manu Garcia right now. And I see this front four causing the LA Galaxy a ton of problems. For whatever reason, Daniel Shalhoub, he was kind of out of favor with Peter Vermees. Zavagnin comes in, and Daniel Shalhoub looks like a player reborn. I don't love his Sasha Kljestan mustache, but that's for another day. He is playing very well.
Don't hate on mustaches, Daxie, just because you can't grow one.
I can absolutely grow one, and one of these days I will show you mine. It's beautiful. But I do believe that this attacking front four of Sporting Kansas City under Kerry Zavagnin, they look more threatening, they look more dangerous. Kerry Zavagnin actually just came out and said after their loss to FC Cincinnati that he was very happy with the performance, and he actually thought it was their best performance under him as an interim manager so far. So I think nothing is going right for the LA Galaxy right now. They go into Sporting Kansas City, a Sporting Kansas City team who, quite frankly, should be confident that they're the favorites and that they are going to get a win at home this weekend.
Well, Sporting Kansas City welcoming the LA Galaxy over in Kansas. Andrew Wiebe, I've been told that he's going to be playing a game of chess with Joveljic, who apparently is world class. Well, I cannot wait to see that. That you can watch on Countdown with us on Sunday Night Soccer, kicking off at 6 p.m. Eastern. For myself, Kaylin Kyle, Kaylin Carr, and the birthday man, Dax McCarty. Thank you so much for joining us on This Is MLS. Ciao.